Jack Malone, a seasoned hacker and cyber detective, had seen his fair share of the strange and the uncanny during his years navigating the dark corners of the internet. It was a typical rainy night in Seattle when he stumbled upon a hidden forum while following a trail of encrypted messages linked to a recent string of cybercrimes. The forum was an old-school bulletin board populated by the kind of esoteric tech enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists Jack found both fascinating and occasionally useful for his investigations. Among the threads discussing obsolete programming languages and urban legends about rogue AIs, one post caught Jack's eye. The title was simple yet intriguing. Shadows of Seattle, a game that knows you. The post was authored by a user named Vhall87 and featured a download link to a vintage computer game, accompanied by a cryptic message. Do you dare to uncover the truth behind the shadows? Jack's curiosity got the better of him. He downloaded the game, which came as a zipped file containing a single executable. The file size was surprisingly small, reminiscent of early 90s shareware games. As the game installed, Jack noted the eerie, minimalist design of the start screen, black and white with pixelated graphics depicting a dark, twisted version of the Seattle skyline. The title, Shadows of Seattle, flickered ominously. From the moment he started the game, an unsettling feeling crept over him. The game opened with a grainy black and white cutscene showing a shadowy figure roaming the fog-laden streets of Seattle. The figure paused and turned, as if looking directly at Jack through the screen. A text box appeared. Welcome, Jack Malone. Jack's heart skipped a beat. The game had used his real name. He paused, rationalizing that the name could have been pulled from his computer's profile, but the level of detail in the game's environment was uncanny. It mirrored real Seattle streets and landmarks with an eerie precision. He navigated his in-game character through familiar neighborhoods, now twisted and shadow-infested. As Jack continued playing, he noticed something even more disturbing. The game seemed to respond to his real-life actions. When he left his computer to grab a cup of coffee, his character on screen stood idle, mirroring his absence. When he returned, the character moved again, as if acknowledging his presence. The in-game antagonist, a shadowy entity named Nyx, began to communicate directly with him through text prompts, taunting him with personal details only someone close to him would know. Your coffee won't save you, Jack, a message read as he took a sip. I see you. I know you. Panic started to set in. Jack tried to exit the game, but the screen froze, and the sound of static filled the room. The shadowy figure of Nyx appeared again, its form shifting and flickering. You can't escape me, Jack. This is only the beginning. Desperate, Jack pulled the plug on his computer, plunging his apartment into silence. He sat there, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It had to be a sophisticated prank or some kind of advanced AI designed to mess with the player's mind. But the fear he felt was real. The next morning, Jack woke up to find his apartment in disarray. Objects had moved overnight, and cryptic symbols were etched into his walls, symbols that matched those he had seen in the game. The once abstract fear now took on a tangible form, haunting his every step. Determined to uncover the truth, Jack plunged into an investigation, using all his hacking skills to trace the origins of Shadows of Seattle. His search led him to the game's creator, Victor Hall, a brilliant but reclusive programmer who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances years ago. As Jack dug deeper, he uncovered rumors and whispers in dark web forums, suggesting that Hall had delved into occult practices, embedding arcane rituals within the game's code. Jack's apartment became a command center as he pieced together Hall's story. He discovered that Hall had lived in an old workshop on the outskirts of Seattle, a place now abandoned and reputed to be haunted. Armed with this knowledge, Jack decided to visit the workshop, hoping to find clues that could explain the game's eerie power. When Jack arrived at the workshop, it was exactly as he had pictured. A dilapidated building, overgrown with ivy and shrouded in a perpetual twilight. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Old computers and notebooks littered the space, and strange arcane symbols were scrawled on the walls and floors. Jack sifted through the chaos, finding notebooks filled with a mix of programming code and what appeared to be occult symbols. One message stood out, written in a hurried, almost frantic hand. "Nix lives." As Jack read the message, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The shadows in the corners of the workshop writhed and stretched, and a chilling whisper echoed around him, calling his name. The malevolent presence he had felt through the screen was here, real and more terrifying than he had ever imagined. Jack realized that he was no longer just playing a game. He was entangled in a deadly battle against a shadowy entity that could manipulate reality itself. The game, Shadows of Seattle, was a portal, a conduit for Nix to enter the real world. And now it was up to Jack to find a way to stop it before he became its next victim. Jack Malone couldn't shake the eerie feeling from the workshop. The cryptic message, "Nix lives," echoed in his mind as he made his way back to his apartment in downtown Seattle. Rain pelted the city, turning the streets into shimmering rivers of light reflected from neon signs and street lights. Jack's mind raced, filled with thoughts of shadowy entities and haunted games. Arriving at his apartment, Jack felt a strange sense of disorientation. His usually organized space now felt foreign, as if the shadows were watching him. He booted up his computer and saw the Shadows of Seattle icon on his desktop. Hesitating for a moment, he clicked it. The game resumed right where it had left off, the shadowy figure of Nix staring at him from the screen. Jack navigated through the game, trying to ignore the unsettling messages and the eerie accuracy of the in-game environment. He found himself at an in-game location that mirrored the workshop he had just visited. As he explored the virtual space, he encountered more cryptic symbols and a diary entry from Victor Hall, detailing his descent into madness as he attempted to control the malevolent entity he had summoned. Just as Jack was about to exit the game, his screen flickered and the lights in his apartment dimmed. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to grow darker and more defined. Suddenly, his computer screen went black, and a chilling voice echoed through his apartment. "You can't hide from me, Jack." Startled, Jack spun around, scanning the room. The voice was unmistakably Nix's. He felt a cold presence behind him, and when he turned back to his computer, the game had changed. The screen displayed a live feed of his apartment, showing him sitting at his desk. The shadowy figure of Nix stood behind him, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Panic surged through Jack. He tried to shut off his computer, but it wouldn't respond. Desperately, he yanked the power cord from the wall. The screen went dark, but the sense of dread remained. Jack backed away from his desk, breathing heavily. Determined to find answers, Jack turned to the internet. He searched for any information on Victor Hall and the game's origins. What he found was a trail of rumors and urban legends. Hall was rumored to have been obsessed with the occult and had vanished without a trace shortly after releasing Shadows of Seattle. The game had been linked to several mysterious disappearances and deaths, but no one had been able to prove a connection. As Jack delved deeper, he found a name that kept coming up in relation to Hall's work. Mia Sinclair, a former occult researcher turned paranormal investigator. She had written extensively about haunted artifacts and the dangers of dabbling in dark magic. Jack decided to contact her, hoping she could shed some light on his increasingly dire situation. Jack reached out to Mia via email, detailing his experiences with the game and the chilling encounters with Nyx. To his surprise, she responded almost immediately, agreeing to meet him the next day. She warned him to stay away from the game until they could figure out what was happening. That night, Jack barely slept. Every creak of his apartment seemed amplified, and the shadows felt alive. He kept his computer unplugged and tried to reassure himself that this was all some elaborate prank or psychological trick. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. The next morning, Jack met Mia at a small cafe on Capitol Hill. She was a striking woman in her early 30s with piercing green eyes and an air of confidence that put him at ease. She listened intently as Jack recounted his experiences, nodding thoughtfully. "I've heard of Victor Hall," Mia said. "He was a brilliant programmer, but he got involved with some very dark practices. If what you're saying is true, it sounds like he succeeded in summoning something far more powerful than he could control." Jack shivered. "What do we do? How do we stop it?" Mia leaned in, her expression serious. "We need to find Hall's hidden journal. It's said to contain the ritual he used to summon Nyx, and hopefully a way to banish it. But this won't be easy. Nyx is aware of us now, and it will do everything in its power to stop us." Jack nodded, determined. "Where do we start?" Mia smiled grimly. "We start by going back to the workshop. If Hall left any clues, that's where we'll find them. But be prepared, Jack. Nyx is no ordinary spirit. It's a shadow demon, and it won't go down without a fight." As they left the cafe, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows seemed to twist and move in unnatural ways, and the air felt charged with a malevolent energy. He knew they were in for a battle, but with Mia's help, he felt a glimmer of hope. Together they would uncover the truth and put an end to Nyx's reign of terror. Jack Malone and Mia Sinclair returned to the workshop with a sense of urgency and dread. The building stood in the misty Seattle outskirts, a forgotten relic of Victor Hall's troubled legacy. Jack's mind buzzed with the anticipation of uncovering the secrets that lay hidden within. As they stepped inside, the air grew heavy with the weight of countless unspoken horrors. The workshop was just as Jack remembered, dust-laden and filled with remnants of Hall's work. Mia began examining the arcane symbols scattered across the walls and floors, her fingers tracing the patterns with a mix of fascination and concern. These symbols are part of an ancient summoning ritual, Mia explained. Hall was trying to control Nix, but something went terribly wrong. We need to find his journal. It's our only hope. Jack and Mia split up to search the workshop more thoroughly. Jack sifted through piles of papers and old notebooks, while Mia focused on a hidden compartment she had discovered behind a bookshelf. The shadows seemed to grow darker and more oppressive as they worked, and a chill ran down Jack's spine every time he caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of his eye. After what felt like hours, Mia let out a triumphant cry. She held up a worn, leather-bound journal, its pages filled with dense writing and intricate diagrams. "This is it," she said, her voice a mixture of relief and trepidation. As they began to read through Hall's notes, the full extent of his madness became apparent. He had been obsessed with controlling Nix, believing that the Shadow Demon could grant him unparalleled power. But Hall's final entries were frantic and desperate, detailing how Nix had turned against him, growing stronger with each failed attempt to banish it. "We need to perform the banishment ritual," Mia said, her eyes scanning the pages. "But it requires rare ingredients that are scattered across the city, hidden in places significant to Hall's life." Jack's heart sank. "We're running out of time. Nix is getting stronger, and it's already affecting reality." Mia nodded. "We'll need to move quickly and stay vigilant. Nix will try to stop us at every turn." Their first destination was the Seattle Public Library, a place Hall had frequented during his research. As they approached the grand glass and steel structure, Jack felt a growing sense of unease. Inside, the usually bustling library was eerily quiet. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting unsettling shadows along the rows of bookshelves. They made their way to the rare books section, guided by Hall's notes. There, among ancient tomes and dusty manuscripts, they found the first ingredient: a small vial of powdered bone hidden in a hollowed-out book. As Jack reached for it, the room grew colder and a shadowy figure materialized in front of them. Nix had found them. The figure's eyes glowed with malevolent light, and its voice echoed through the library. "You cannot escape me, Jack." Panic surged through Jack, but Mia stood her ground. She began chanting an incantation from Hall's journal, and the figure recoiled, its form flickering. "Grab the vial, Jack," she shouted. Jack snatched the vial and followed Mia as she ran towards the exit. The shadowy figure pursued them, its presence distorting reality around them. Books flew off shelves and the walls seemed to close in. They burst out of the library, gasping for breath, the vial clutched tightly in Jack's hand. "We can't keep running like this," Jack said, panting. "We need to find the other ingredients and perform the ritual quickly." Their next stop was an old, abandoned church where Hall had once sought refuge. The church stood in ruins, its stained glass windows shattered and pews overturned. As they searched for the next ingredient, a vial of holy water, the oppressive presence of Nix grew stronger. Jack spotted the vial near the altar, but as he reached for it, the shadows in the church came to life. Dark tendrils wrapped around his legs, pulling him back. He struggled, his heart racing, as Mia began another incantation. The tendrils loosened their grip just enough for Jack to grab the vial and break free. Exhausted and shaken, they moved on to their final destination, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city where Hall had conducted his experiments. The warehouse was a labyrinth of rusted machinery and dark corridors. As they searched for the final ingredient, a shard of obsidian, they felt Nix's presence intensify. Jack found the shard in a small hidden compartment. As he held it up, the air around them grew thick with shadows. Nix materialized once more, its form larger and more terrifying than before. "You cannot banish me," it hissed. "I am eternal." Mia began the final incantation, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Jack held the ingredients tightly, focusing on Mia's words. The shadows writhed and screamed, but as the incantation reached its climax, a blinding light erupted from the obsidian shard, engulfing Nix. The shadow demon let out a final, ear-piercing scream before being torn apart by the light. The warehouse fell silent, the oppressive darkness lifting. Jack and Mia stood in the aftermath, their hearts pounding, but they knew they had succeeded. Exhausted but victorious, they left the warehouse, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. Jack knew that while they had banished Nix, the experience had changed him forever. The shadows of Seattle would always hold a haunting memory, but with Mia's help, he had faced the darkness and emerged on the other side. Jack and Mia's victory over Nix was short-lived. Though the immediate threat had been quelled, they knew they had only bought themselves time. Nix was a powerful shadow demon, and its banishment would not be permanent without the completion of the ritual. Armed with the ingredients they had gathered, they returned to Victor Hall's workshop, where the final showdown awaited them. The workshop, shrouded in an eerie stillness, seemed almost to anticipate their return. The air was thick with a palpable tension, and the oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on Jack and Mia as they entered. The shadows that clung to the corners of the room seemed to writhe and pulse, as if alive with a malevolent energy. Mia spread out Hall's journal on a workbench, meticulously arranging the ingredients they had collected. "We have everything we need," she said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "The ritual must be performed at the stroke of midnight. We have less than an hour." Jack nodded, glancing at the old clock on the wall, its hands slowly ticking towards the fateful hour. He felt a cold dread seep into his bones, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. "What do we need to do?" he asked. Mia pointed to a chalk circle inscribed with arcane symbols on the floor, which Hall had prepared years ago. "We need to place the ingredients in the circle and chant the incantation together. It's crucial that we don't break the circle, no matter what happens." As the clock's minute hand crept closer to midnight, Jack and Mia began the preparations. They placed the vial of powdered bone, the vial of holy water, and the shard of obsidian in the designated spots within the circle. The air grew colder with each passing second, and the shadows seemed to close in around them. "Ready?" Mia asked, her eyes meeting Jack's with a mixture of determination and fear. Jack took a deep breath. "Let's do this." They began to chant the incantation from Hall's journal, their voices echoing through the dimly lit workshop. The words were in an ancient, guttural language that felt unnatural on their tongues. As they chanted, the ingredients within the circle began to glow with an otherworldly light. The shadows around them roiled and surged, and a low, menacing growl filled the room. Jack glanced up, his heart racing as he saw Nyx materialize at the edge of the circle. The demon's form was more solid now, a terrifying amalgamation of darkness and glowing eyes. "You think you can banish me?" Nyx hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "You are fools to challenge my power." Jack felt a surge of fear, but he continued to chant, his voice growing louder and more insistent. Mia's eyes were fixed on the journal, her face a mask of concentration. The light within the circle intensified, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. Nyx lunged at them, but an invisible barrier held it at bay, repelled by the power of the ritual. The demon screamed in fury, its form distorting and writhing as it struggled to break through. Jack felt a wave of nausea and dizziness wash over him, but he forced himself to stay focused. The clock struck midnight, and the final words of the incantation left their lips. The ingredients within the circle erupted in a blinding flash of light, and a shockwave of energy rippled through the room. Nyx let out a blood-curdling scream, its form disintegrating into tendrils of shadow that were sucked into the circle. The light faded, and the workshop fell silent. Jack and Mia stood in the aftermath, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The oppressive presence that had filled the room was gone, replaced by a sense of profound stillness. "It's over," Jack said, his voice hoarse. "We did it." Mia nodded, her expression one of relief and exhaustion. "We've banished Nyx, but we need to destroy this place. Hall's work can't fall into the wrong hands." They gathered what little strength they had left and began to dismantle the workshop. They destroyed Hall's notes, the ritual circle, and the remaining arcane symbols. Jack poured gasoline over the workbench and lit a match, watching as the flames consumed the remnants of Hall's dark legacy. As they left the burning workshop, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon. Jack felt a sense of closure, but also a lingering unease. The shadows of Seattle had left their mark on him, and he knew he would never be the same. Yet, with Mia by his side, he felt ready to face whatever the future held. Together they walked away from the workshop, their silhouettes fading into the morning light. The battle was over, but the memories of the shadows would haunt them forever. The smoldering ruins of Victor Hall's workshop were a stark reminder of the battle they had just won. Jack and Mia stood silently for a moment, absorbing the gravity of what they had done. But as the flames consumed Hall's dark legacy, a sense of unease gnawed at Jack. Something didn't feel right. "We should head back," Mia said, her voice breaking the silence. "We need to be sure there are no remnants of Nyx's influence left behind." Jack nodded, but as they began their journey back to his apartment, a chill ran down his spine. The city of Seattle seemed different, quieter, as if holding its breath. Shadows lingered in the corners of his vision, flickering unnaturally. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the feeling as paranoia, but deep down he knew their ordeal wasn't over. When they arrived at Jack's apartment, the unease turned to dread. The front door was ajar, and inside the apartment was shrouded in darkness, despite it being mid-morning. Jack cautiously stepped inside, Mia close behind, both of them ready for anything. The air was thick with a palpable sense of menace. The once familiar space now felt alien. Furniture was overturned, and the walls were covered in cryptic symbols and dark smears. The computer, which Jack had unplugged, was now turned on, displaying the Shadows of Seattle start screen. The screen flickered, and the shadowy figure of Nix appeared, more defined and menacing than ever. "You thought you could destroy me?" Nix's voice echoed through the room, filled with malice and mockery. "I am eternal. You cannot banish the shadows." Jack felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He and Mia had done everything right, followed the ritual to the letter. How could Nix still be here? Mia stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. "We're not afraid of you, Nix," she said, her voice steady. "We will find a way to end this." Nix laughed, a sound that sent chills down their spines. "You cannot end what you do not understand. This city's shadows are my domain. You are merely players in my game." The lights flickered and the room seemed to twist and warp around them. Shadows coalesced into tangible forms, dark specters that reached out with clawed hands. Jack and Mia backed up, their eyes darting for any escape route, but the apartment had become a labyrinth of darkness, each corner hiding a new horror. "Stay together," Jack whispered, grabbing Mia's hand. "We need to get out of here." They moved cautiously, but every step seemed to take them deeper into the heart of the nightmare. The walls closed in, and the floor beneath them felt unstable, like walking on shifting sand. The shadows were relentless, attacking with a ferocity they had never experienced before. Mia pulled out a small vial from her pocket. Holy water. She splashed it on the nearest specter, and it recoiled with a screech, dissolving into the darkness. "We need to find the source," she said, her voice strained. "Nix must have anchored itself to something here." Jack's mind raced. The computer. Nix had reappeared when they saw the game running on the screen. It must be the anchor. "The computer!" he shouted. "We need to destroy it." They fought their way through the onslaught of shadows, using the holy water to clear a path. Nix's laughter echoed around them, growing more manic as they approached the desk. The computer screen flickered violently, displaying disturbing images of twisted faces and tortured souls. Jack grabbed a chair and swung it at the monitor with all his strength. The screen shattered, sparks flying as the computer crumpled under the assault. For a moment, the shadows paused, a low hiss filling the air. "Fools," Nix's voice was a venomous snarl. "You think this will stop me? I am beyond your reach." The room plunged into complete darkness. Jack and Mia were enveloped in an inky black void, Nix's presence pressing down on them from all sides. Jack felt Mia's grip tighten on his hand, a lifeline in the consuming darkness. "We need to finish the ritual." Mia's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the darkness like a beacon. There must be another way. Jack remembered Hall's journal, the pages they hadn't read in their haste. He pulled it out, flipping through the pages frantically. His eyes landed on a passage they had overlooked, a final incantation, a last-ditch effort Hall had never completed. "Mia, here," he said, pointing to the passage. "We need to do this together." They began to chant, their voices merging in a desperate harmony. The shadows surged around them, Nix's form appearing in the swirling darkness, more monstrous than ever. The demon's eyes burned with fury and it lashed out, trying to break their concentration. "Keep going," Mia urged, her voice unwavering despite the chaos. The incantation reached its crescendo, and a brilliant light burst forth from the journal. Nyx screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage and pain. The light expanded, pushing back the darkness, illuminating the apartment and revealing the true form of the shadows, twisted, tormented souls bound to Nyx's will. As the light enveloped Nyx, the demon's form began to disintegrate, its screams fading into a haunting wail. The shadows dissolved, releasing the trapped souls, and the apartment returned to its normal state. The oppressive presence lifted, replaced by an almost serene calm. Jack and Mia stood in the aftermath, their breaths heavy but filled with relief. The journal in Jack's hand crumbled to dust, its purpose fulfilled. They had done it. They had truly banished Nyx. Outside, the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over the city of Seattle. Jack looked at Mia, a weary smile on his face. "It's really over this time." Mia nodded, her eyes reflecting the morning light. "Yes, it is. We've freed the city from Nyx's grasp." As they walked out into the light, Jack knew they had faced the darkness and won. The shadows of Seattle would always be a part of him, a haunting memory of the battle they fought. But with Mia by his side, he felt ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that together they could overcome any darkness.